So welcome, everybody. This is very cool. And we've been doing Zoom meetings for 3 years. And what's really cool about the Zoom meetings is everybody can come from around the world. And it's special in its own way. And it's just different, but I've missed this, having these meetings here. So welcome to you, and welcome to those of you looking at this on video. You probably remember how we work these, and we'll have a short introduction to the topic, which for us is going to be preferences versus demands. And I'll show a short video, and we'll go into small groups for and a meditation, and we'll go into small groups for about 30 minutes, groups of 4 probably, and then come back as a large group and chat for a little while and share, and then we'll break, and those of you who want to hang around for a while can consume some of the snacks we put out. I won't tell you that we cleaned out our closets. We haven't had guests for so long. And they're really not 3 years old, the stuff that we brought out. So when I was thinking about preferences and demands, I was thinking how often we do have a preference. Everybody has preferences. I mean, and things aren't always the way we want them to be, right? So I'm going to ask each of you, over the last month, can you remember a time during the last month when things weren't exactly the way you wanted them to be? This is actually an equipment check. Make sure you know how to raise your hand. How about the last week? Today? Now? I mean, some of you are sitting in uncomfortable chairs, and we've got a camera and equipment between everybody else. So there are things that could be a little bit better. But the distinction we're making is the difference between a preference of how I like things to be. And we all have preferences. There's nothing wrong with preferences. But when it becomes a demand, something else happens. When it comes to a demand, then you cannot be happy with how it is if it's not the way you had wanted it to be. And there's always a way to make things a little bit better. And those of you who know me know that I have an addiction, and that's ice cream. And if there's a pint or a quart or a half gallon of ice cream, it will be gone. But even no matter how much I've eaten, the last spoonful, I'm always a little sad because it's the last spoonful. As if it tastes worse than the rest. Of course, it doesn't. And there's a book that I got this pairing of terms from. And it's Joko Beck's book, Nothing Special. And she's got another wonderful book called Everyday Zen. And they're just great reads. I mean, she's very down to earth. She had a real life before she became a Zen teacher. And I've just got to share one story. When I first got really serious about meditating, I'd been meditating since I was like 16 or 17, but I got really serious. So I'm going to do this regularly, like every day I'm going to meditate. I decided that was how it was going to be. And so I called up the San Diego Zen Center to see when the next retreat was going to be. Called at night, so I figured I'd get a recording and leave a message. And it was Joko who answered the phone. I said, "Oh, it's you. You're answering the phone." She says, "This is my phone. Who else do you think would be answering it?" It's like 8 o'clock at night. So I'm just sitting here reading a mystery. What can I help you with? And so I told her I wasn't interested in a retreat, and she advised me against it. These were Zen retreat sessions, which are very rigid and very, it's not something somebody just meditates for 20, 30 minutes once in a while would be equipped to do if they've never been on even a multi-day retreat. And so she says there's 2 kinds of desires. That's what she says in this book. There's preferences and there's demands. Nothing wrong with preferences. Everybody has them. But preferences become a problem when they turn into demands. When this is how it has to be. I won't be happy unless it's this way. And when it becomes a demand, that it really derails you from the present moment, doesn't it? Because it's like you're already thinking about not having what you want or how it should be or why it's not good right now. And it keeps you from being in the moment, appreciating what's actually happening right then. So we'll look at preferences and demands on that kind of another level too. But Well, we've all seen him when it gets out of hand. If you're in an airport and the flight's late and there's some obnoxious passenger who's railing at the flight agent who has no responsibility for making the plane late. It's just, she happens to be the one sitting there, and they just start, and just, so it's just not just that it's uncomfortable for you, it's uncomfortable for other people because it's annoying if you're like that, if you make demands like that. And the art is, and there's the other direction too. If you have, like I have new zero preferences, doesn't matter to me. It always be, my mom was like, you'd never tell me what you wanted. I said, well, do you want to do this or whatever? It doesn't matter, honey. Either one's okay. I said, Mom, which one do you want? It doesn't matter, honey. Then we do the one other thing. It's just too bad we didn't do the other one. So that's the other way, and there's the middle ground. And how do you find that middle ground? You know, where it's okay to state what your preference is, but you don't make it into a demand. And it doesn't mean that you don't have that you don't abide by contracts and you don't hold people accountable, but it just means you're not making a demand of life. And when I was thinking about this topic, I was remembering a client who came to me some years ago when I was still practicing. And he came to me because he'd had he was really depressed, and he had a tragedy in his life a few months before. And he just lost, well, I'll tell you what he lost, but he lost his faith. He's a very religious guy, and he just said, I don't have any faith in anything anymore. His son, a few months before, had started out on a trip, and he was seeing him off, and driving off in the driveways from here, Moscow, to Seattle. And as he was seeing him off, he said a little prayer for him, asking God to keep him safe. 2 hours later, his son hit a Greyhound bus head on, killed instantly. So you can just imagine what that did to him, not just personally, but to his faith. He had no faith. After that, he said, I don't have any faith in anything, God or anything else. And we worked on this for a while, and after a few months, he came to me, he says, you know, Sai, he says, I'm more resolved now about it. I do have faith again, but it's a different kind of faith. It's when I pray for people, I don't pray for them the same way as it used to be. I pray that they would be safe, and that's too much to ask because nobody can know. But my prayer is that God will be with them, whatever happens. I just thought that was a beautiful prayer, and I'm not really a religious guy, but for me, that I could translate that to my own faith, you know, having a trust in that things are the way they are, even if you don't know the reasons for them. And no one would say that wanting a loved one to be safe is wrong, but for my client, expecting that being a good Christian was going to make things the way he wanted them was probably an unrealistic expectation, and it nearly cost him his faith. Years ago, Jack Canfield collected a group of stories. You've probably seen his books, Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I had the privilege of knowing him, and so I would keep recommending things to him. And a number of the stories I recommended to him, he published. And one of them was called The Terribly Tragically Sad Man. And some of you have heard this story. I'm not going to read the entire thing because it's a little bit long, but I'll just read the beginning. The beginning is, once there was a boy who lived in a big house on a hill. He loved dogs and horses, sports cars and music. He climbed trees and went swimming, played football, and admired pretty girls. And except for having to pick up after himself, he had a pretty good life. So one day the boy said to God, he said, I've been thinking, and I think I know what I want when I become a man. And God says, what? So I want to live in a big house with a porch across the front, 2 St. Bernards, a garden out back. I want to marry a woman who's tall and beautiful and kind, who has long black hair and blue eyes and plays the guitar, sings in a high, clear voice. I want 3 strong sons. That was enough. I want 3 strong sons to play football with, and when they grow up, one will be a great scientist, one will be a senator, and the youngest will be a quarterback for the 49ers. Feel sorry for those 3 kids. I want to be an adventurer who sails vast oceans and climbs tall mountains and rescues people. And I want to drive a red Ferrari and never have to pick up after myself. And God says, that sounds like a nice dream. So I want you to be happy. So the story goes on and time passes and he remembers this dream, but things hadn't turned out the way he had asked God to make them for him. And he goes through all his friends and his acquaintances. It always starts out the same way. He says, I'm very sad. And they say, why are you sad? And to his wife and to his accountant and to his minister. And they all listened to what he had to say and said, but you've got a pretty good life. I mean, look at what you got. And he always, and the passage would end with, but he didn't listen. He was still sad. So he goes through all of these. And he was so sad, the story goes on, he winds up in the hospital. And the scene is he's in the hospital bed with wires and tubes and medical equipment. And he remembers this dream. And he says, after the nurses have left and things are quiet, he says to God, he says, remember when I was a little boy and I told you what I wanted? But I didn't get, and God says, yes, that was a wonderful dream. He says, but you didn't give them to me. He says, well, I thought I wanted to surprise you with, I wanted you to be surprised with what I did get you. And after all, I got you a pretty good package. You've got a wonderful wife. She's beautiful. She's a wonderful cook. Maybe she doesn't sing and she doesn't have the color hair that you expected. You got a great job. You're not living in the country, but you're on the 47th floor in a very nice place with a view of the ocean. It's one of the best packages I've ever put together. And he says, yeah, but it wasn't what I wanted. And so God says, well, I didn't get what I wanted either. He says, what? He says, you're God. How can you want for anything? He says, well, I just wanted you to be happy with what I got you. I've told this story so many times, and I always get kind of emotional then. And so the story goes, the man dreamt a different dream that night. And he dreamt that he was happy with all the things that he already had. And the last part of the story, just 2 lines, he gets well, goes back home, and he's sitting on the couch looking out over the night sky, seeing the lights of the city come on one by one with his wife in his arms. Isn't that a beautiful story? I thought about these stories, and Lauren always asked me what I'm going to talk about, and I told her, and as a result of our conversation, I realized there was something interesting about the 2 stories I chose because they both have God at the center, and I'm not really religious in that way. I have a friend who calls himself an agnostic with Buddhist leanings. I said, well, that describes me. I'm not Buddhist, I'm not Christian, I'm not Jewish, but yeah, agnostic, Buddhist leanings, I like that. That's fine. I believe there's something bigger than us, but we can't possibly know what that is. And there's another short story I wanted to share with you about this idea about being happy with whatever comes. A story. Pema Chodron is one that said this. She said one of the best spiritual practices is to wake up every morning and say, I wonder what's going to happen today. Yeah. And there's a story about a rabbi in Tsarist Russia that had gotten that message for him. He says, and he had come to a place in his life where he no longer had strict expectations of how things had to be. He recognized he really truly didn't know what was going to be in the next day or a week or even a moment. And whenever anybody asked him a question, his answer, not a very rabbi-like answer, would be, I don't know. And not everybody was pleased with that answer, but that's the answer he'd always give. And one morning he was walking on the way to synagogue, and this is Tsarist Russia, mind you, and the policeman, same corner that the policeman always sees him walk past, he says, Rabbi, where are you going? He says, I don't know. And the policeman says, What do you mean you don't know? He said, I don't know. So how can you not know? You come by this corner every day at 6 o'clock in the morning, going to synagogue to pray. How can you say you don't know? He said, I don't know. And the policeman got so upset with him, and this is Tsarist Russia, took him, threw him in jail. And as the door is closing, the rabbi puts his finger through the bars and says, you see, you never know. And what I love about that story is that he does that with playfulness. And you can imagine that as awful as it would be for any one of us to get thrown in. I mean, this is not an unrealistic story. I mean, you can't expect that any of us get to the point of our own evolution where we'd be happy to be thrown in jail. But there's something in the message there about distinguishing between have-tos, things have to be this way for me to be happy, and likes. I'd like for things to be this way. And so I thought about, I hadn't quite finished with the God thing in those two stories, why I had chosen stories about God, because the preferences and demands really aren't about preferences and demands of other people. It's what we expect of life, how life to treat us, how things have to be for us, whether things have to be a certain way or not have to be a certain way. And that's bigger than us. It's not just a relationship. So the video I wanted to share with you, I took an hour-long video that Tara Brach did called Hungry Ghosts. And it's one part of it which talks specifically about desire, and I thought would be good to share with you. And I made it 13 minutes instead of our usual 20 minutes, so I think it's digestible that way. So I'll set up the video, and then after the video we'll do our meditation, and then we'll do our small groups.
I've shared that when I was in high school, my introduction to Buddhism was basically you need to let go of your attachments and not be caught in desire. And I thought that meant that desire was bad. And it was quite a number of years till I came back around to Buddhism. But it was a misunderstanding. And it's one that I see in a lot of people, because the teachings are not that desire is bad. In fact, desire goes hand in hand with existing. There's no existence without desire. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for desire, really. And filling desire can be temporarily pleasant, and not having it filled can be temporarily unpleasant, but it's being caught that's the suffering. Okay? It's the caught part of it. It's where there's a hook, and we're going to look in our lives where we have that hook, where there's a sense of, I have to have this to be happy. I have to have this to feel okay. If life doesn't cooperate in this way, it's really not okay. Okay? And so the first question to ask is, well, what actually is desire? Because it's considered this universal energy that all life desires to exist, to flourish. And I remember some years ago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I read a really interesting article in the New York Times Science section that described how a mathematically perfectly balanced universe couldn't exist. In other words, if matter and antimatter were exactly equal, they'd cancel each other out. Okay? But, and there was one of those demonstrations in the FEMI National Accelerator Lab where they created a little mini universe and show what happened right after the Big Bang. And they show in collisions that there is a slight bias of certain elements in the electron to its charged opposite. So there's this cosmically minuscular leaning towards attraction, so that rather than canceling each other out, existence happens. Now, my understanding doesn't go any deeper than that. But it's, to me, what the intuition is that formless being wants to manifest. It's like the ocean wants to have waves, and that the ocean knows itself through the appearance of waves. That's my favorite way of describing it to myself, that it's an integral part of this whole universe, that we awaken through through perceiving, form, then the ocean perceives itself through the ways we perceive what we are, this awareness and love through forms. So it's an organizing principle. And desire takes on different dimensions of aliveness. It takes on the dimension of the desire for food, to connect with food in the material plane, to be alive, and sex, and self-esteem, and feeling safe, and feeling bonded, and self-realization, and awareness itself. There are different dimensions of desire, what we yearn for. So what turns desire into attachment? In other words, where do we get some hooks and stickiness in here? The Latin word for desire is desiderare, and it means away from your star. So when there's desire, there's some sense of being away from home and a longing for homecoming. And that feels kind of intuitively true. That I think of it that our star is the energetic source of our being, the awareness that's the source of our being. And we have a longing to come home to our true nature, to really rest in our wholeness. So each dimension of desire, from gross to increasingly subtle expression, they're expressions of aliveness, from the gross to the more and more subtle, from wanting food to wanting the enlightened experience of awareness itself. Now, the hook. If our basic needs are not met, if our basic needs for food, for security, for bonding are not met, then our attention narrows and fixates. Desire becomes fixated. Desire intensifies. And the more unmet needs, the more we get fixated until we call it attachment or addiction. And some examples are this, that they've seen with chimps, that when there's poor bonding, then the young chimp grows up not only to be very aggressive, but to be a binge eater. Okay? Just that's what it is. That's the substitute gratification. That's a primitive reward system. And then with fruit flies, and I found this from an article called Sex and Alcohol on a Very Small Scale. Male fruit flies deprived of sex may turn to alcohol as a source of pleasure. They did an experiment where they had two groups of male fruit flies, and one had sex, the other was deprived of sex. It's a cruel, cruel experiment. And the sexually deprived males overwhelmingly selected the boozy brew. They were given to either a normal mush or a boozy mush, and they drank 4 times as much as their sexually satisfied brethren. I love the way they write these articles, but anyway. But you get the idea that, and so you say, okay, so unmet needs. So what are the characteristics of attachment or suffering? And there's a feeling of lack. Something's unmet, that something's missing. Then there is a mental delusion as to what will actually bring satisfaction and happiness. That's where we hook onto substitutes that give temporary relief or pleasure, but don't really solve the problem, okay? And we grasp. Okay, so there's a feeling of need, a misperception of what's going to work, and then a grasping onto the substitute. Just a comment on this delusion, because it's really a pervasive feature of our psyche that we have ideas about what will bring us happiness, and we're regularly wrong. It's really interesting. Lottery winners are ultimately no happier than non-winners. Everybody at that Sands casino, it really didn't matter whether they were going to win or lose in terms of their happiness quotient. It's not right away. It takes some months to come back to your happiness set point, as they describe it. Paraplegics are usually as content as people can walk. We anticipate good things happening, like a job offer or a raise, or even having a child will make us happier, and that bad things will make us more miserable. And it's true, we have spikes, but it evens out. Wanting begets wanting is the idea, and the typical metaphor is it's like drinking salt water to satisfy thirst. So that's one level of suffering. We don't get satisfied. The second I alluded to a little bit before, which is that along with the hungry ghost energy of wanting, we have an aversion towards ourselves for that. How many of you have noticed the shame or self-hatred that comes along with the wanting mind? How many of you have noticed that? Okay. It's a little harder to raise your hand for. In the Buddhist tradition, we call it the second arrow. The first arrow is, I want, I need, I'm not satisfied. And the second arrow is, I'm a bad person for wanting and needing and feeling I'm not satisfied. It's the self-aversion we pile on. Very, very notable as part of the addiction cycle. You know, eat too much, feel really, really bad about yourself, feel like such a bad person, and feel so miserable that you eat more, and then feel bad about yourself, and it just keeps fueling the cycle. Okay. So that's one other level of the suffering, is the self-aversion. And then the last level I'll name is when we're at our casino, when we're really waiting to win or wanting to win and not quite there yet, and it might be because we're seeking the approval, or we're trying to in some way get something we don't have, a job or whatever, we're not present. It's kind of like we're leaning forward, wanting the next moment to contain what this moment does not. And this is the heart of the suffering that comes with the hungry ghost, with wanting mind, with addiction, with attachment. That we can't be present. We're on our way somewhere else. And how many moments of our life is there some sense we're on our way to something rather than this moment counts? It's like in this, right now, listening to this talk, are we on our way to the hub of the talk, or to the end of the talk, or to what we're doing later tonight, or to the weekend, or... It's such a deeply grooved habit to have some discontent and feel something's missing and that we need something more, that we can skim over the surface and not really arrive and take in the sunset, or feel the wind on our cheek, or see the gleam in a child's eyes, or hear the child's laugh. You know, we're not able to connect, be right here, which is ultimately what desire is wanting. It's like we're away from our star. Can we come back? So we can't be happy. And the deep teaching here is that the real way we meet desire, the real way we find happiness, it arises from presence. The only place you can really be happy is when there's an openness and a wakefulness and a tenderness right here. So the pursuit of the hungry ghost actually blocks presence. It blocks us from feeling the light of our own spirit, the light of that star. The word desire, away from our star, the satisfaction of desire is recognizing that our star, the light and love we seek, is here. It's in this moment. And as long as we fixate outside ourselves, we can't experience that. So this is key, that the healing from attachment or addiction is really discovering how to find the spirit that's always been here, but feels like it's been draining out or empty. How to discover that star that's inside us, the light in our own heart. Because when we do, when there's a sense that it's right here, there's still a natural play of desires. And we can enjoy when those particular focused desires are met, and we can not enjoy it when they're not. But there's a basic sense of contentment. There's not craving. I love, there's a cartoon that has a picture of a dog who's having a dream, and it says, Zen dog dreaming of medium-sized bone.
There's a story of, well, many of you have probably heard of Matthew Ricard. He's the monk, the Tibetan monk who Richard Davidson studied at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and hooked him up with, as he did all the monks he studied, he would bring in these monks who had 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. Matthew Ricard had 50,000 hours of meditation experience over 30 years. Do the arithmetic, that's 5 hours a day, every day. It's certainly not us. One of the tests that he did was doing an fMRI and studying the brain, and there's a certain part of the brain that, if it's activated, that indicates somebody who's relatively not anxious, is is happy and content, basically. And so here's this guy who's got all this experience, and he's not just revered by Tibetan monks, but also people in the larger meditation community, and people, anybody who's met him, he's just a genuinely nice guy, and he's not an airhead. He's a PhD in molecular genetics from the Pasteur Institute in France. And after he got his PhD, he upset his father by not going into research or academics and starting going to a Tibetan monastery in Tibet, one of which he runs right now. And there's a story about him having dinner with a colleague, and when dessert comes, he just plows into the dessert, like, man. And his colleague looks at him funny, and because he just can't believe he's making such a scene. He's a Zen monk, supposed to be just chill about everything. And Ricard notices this, and he says, I'm not attached to this dessert. I'm just enjoying it. And if I didn't have the dessert, I would be enjoying something else. And I said that was a wonderful story. It doesn't mean you have to become a rock. You have no response to the life that's around you. So we'll go into a meditation. And you don't have to change your position unless you're more comfortable in another position. So just making yourself comfortable and kind of checking into how you are right now. Now, how it is to be here physically. How you're making contact with the floor, or sensations of warmth or coolness as you make contact with the floor, or the couch, or whatever it is you're sitting or laying on. Letting your body speak to you. How your arms are resting in your lap, or at your side. How you're supported right now by the earth below you. Even though you're not making direct contact with the earth, it's the earth that's supporting us right now. And as you're sensing into body, it's not a one-way communication. There's also something going back from you to your body. You're paying attention in a way you don't normally do. Kind of a gentle, loving hand to the parts of your body you don't normally pay much attention to. It's there, it's supporting you. And if you're not already doing this, paying attention to breath, wherever it is you feel it most vividly. Could be your chest or your throat, or how the air comes in through your nostrils. There really isn't a wrong place to feel your breath. It's wherever you can feel the actual physical movement of breath. And when your mind wanders, which it will, either analyzing what's going on or thinking about something that's going to happen later or something else going on in your life, we're making that part of the meditation too. We don't stay there, but just recognizing it and acknowledging it and coming back to the object of attention, which for now is breath. You might notice the sounds that are happening in the background as well, the sounds of the leaves rustling outside or the wind or things going on in the kitchen here and the machinery going on and off, and just allowing that to be. And when you're ready, you might consider how your life is right now. How are things in your life? What's going well? What's not going well? There may be things at home or at work or people around you that isn't quite right, something that needs to be fixed. We won't spend a long time here, but just finding one thing that isn't quite the way you want it to be. Maybe not the biggest thing that's out, but maybe a small thing that's not really a major thing, but something that's you'd like to be a little bit different. It could be something in the house that needs fixing. It could be a task that's been left undone that needs to be attended to. And if you're willing, seeing if you can exaggerate the wanting of things to be different. Even to the point of letting your body take the position of wanting this to happen. That get a sense of it's not okay that it's not the way you want it to be. Give yourself permission to feel it that way. You really had permission to feel like you really wanted to have this happen. You even imagine your fists clenching and your body tensing as you imagine really, really wanting to make this happen. You have to get it done. You got to push to make this happen. You got to make it different. And as you do this, as you're doing this, noticing how that feels in your body right now. This having to have it be a certain way. Now going the opposite direction, imagine that somehow you woke up one morning and whatever this was didn't bother you at all. You didn't care. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's not important. It's not hard to pretend that the issue isn't important. And if you had this attitude of it didn't matter at all, probably nothing would ever get done about it. Now, if it's possible for you, see if you can find a place somewhere in the middle. Just the right amount of emotional energy, not so much it makes you anxious or uptight, but just enough so that you have enough energy to take the action that needs to be taken, but you're not panicked about it. You can just do what needs to be done. There's just enough energy to do it. And with the right amount of energy, it almost happens by itself once you start. And noticing how different that feels than the have to have it done, the must have. And how does it feel, the thought that you can take action with just the right amount of energy? To end this exploration in a good space for you, you might recall a time when you achieved something you really wanted, sometime recently, sometime in the past. You may have been working on it for a while, or it may have just come to fruition unexpectedly. But when it happened, it was like a sigh of relief. Oh, it got done. And it could have been something major like getting a degree or finishing a project, or it could be something small like just doing a tour around the house. And like the terribly, tragically sad man who discovered that he could be happy with what he has, you might recall the things that you are grateful for in your life, the things that you have, the things that you're happy about, that you're grateful for, the people in your life, the gifts that you have, the gifts that you've been given. And notice how it is to remember those things you are grateful for right now. And the rest of the meditation will be in silence. You can continue with this theme if you like, or you can make it a breath meditation, or you can just make it your time, how you'd like to have this time with yourself. And we'll end the meditation in maybe about 7 or 8 minutes with a bell.